The old alien stood at the front of the lecture hall and looked at the young faces staring back at him. There were about 40 students in the room, all from different species, all training to become diplomats for the Galactic Council. Elder Poma had been teaching this class for over 60 years, and every single year he started with the same lesson. "There is one rule," he said, his voice slow and heavy, "that every species in this galaxy must learn before they do anything else." He pressed a button, and a hologram of a small blue planet appeared behind him. It was not a remarkable planet. It was not the largest, or the richest, or the most advanced. It floated quietly in an ordinary corner of an ordinary galaxy, orbiting an ordinary star. "This is Earth," Poma said, "home of the humans." A few students shifted in their seats. One of them, a tall creature with silver skin, let out a small laugh. Poma ignored it. "The rule is simple," Poma continued. "You may trade with humans. You may talk to them. You may visit their worlds, eat their food, learn their languages. You may even become friends with them. Many species have. But you must never, under any circumstance, threaten them. You must never corner them, and you must absolutely never go to war with them." The silver-skinned student raised a hand. "Elder Poma, with respect, humans are one of the youngest species in the galaxy. They live for less than 100 years. Their bodies are soft. They have no claws, no armor, no venom. Why would we be afraid of them?" Poma smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile a person makes when they know something terrible that others do not. 200 years ago, Poma said, 3 civilizations asked that same question. The Vanthari Empire, the Drogon Collective, and the Hollow Fleet of Morzon. He paused and looked around the room. "Can anyone here tell me where those civilizations are now?" Silence. "They are gone," Poma said quietly. "Not defeated, not conquered. Gone. Their homeworlds still exist. You can visit them if you like. You will find empty cities, empty roads, empty skies. No one lives there anymore. The humans came, did what they needed to do, and left. They did not take the land. They did not steal resources. They simply removed the threat and walked away." He turned off the hologram. The Galactic Council watched it happen 3 times. After the 3rd time, they wrote the rule, not as a law, as a warning. The room was very quiet now. No one was laughing. At that same moment, on the other side of Galactic Station Pora 7, a freight ship called the Baekdu was docking at Port 17. It was not a military ship. It was not large or impressive. Its hull was scratched and dented from years of hauling cargo between distant systems. But the name painted on its side was in a human language, and that was enough to make the docking crew work a little faster and speak a little more politely than usual. Inside the ship, a man named Teho stood at the control panel and guided the vessel into its berth with steady hands. He was in his late 40s, with short gray hair and a calm face that rarely showed emotion. He had been a military officer once, a long time ago, but those days were behind him. Now he carried freight. It was simpler. He preferred it that way. Behind him, a woman named Yuna leaned back in her chair and stretched her arms. She was his co-pilot and communications officer, sharp and quick with words, the kind of person who could talk her way into or out of almost anything. She had worked with Teho for 6 years and trusted him completely, even though he sometimes annoyed her with how little he talked. "Docking complete," Teho said. "Can we eat something that is not freeze-dried noodles now?" The 3rd member of their small crew appeared from the engine room. Do-hwan was young, only 24, a mechanical engineer who had joined the Baekdu because he wanted to see the galaxy. He was always smiling, always curious, always asking aliens questions about their cultures and foods and traditions. Most of them were happy to answer. Some of them were surprised that a human would even care. The three of them stepped off the ship and into the busy corridors of Pora 7. The station was enormous, a city floating in space, filled with thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds. There were merchants selling glowing fruits, engineers arguing over engine parts, children of species that had 6 legs running between the legs of species that had 2. And everywhere they walked, beings stepped aside, not in a rush, not in panic. Just a small, polite shift to the left or right, a slight nod of the head, a quiet acknowledgement. It happened so smoothly that most people would not even notice. But Dohan noticed. "Why does everyone move out of our way?" he asked Yuna quietly as they passed through a crowded market. "We are not important. We are just freight workers." Yuna glanced at him and smiled. "We are not important," she agreed, "but we are human, and out here, that word carries weight. Enjoy it while it lasts." Dohan did not fully understand, but he nodded and kept walking. He stopped at a stall selling small alien pastries, bought 3 of them with station credits, and offered one to a tall alien standing nearby. The alien looked down at him, surprised, then accepted the pastry with a careful hand and thanked him. None of them noticed the figure watching from a balcony 2 levels above the market. He was tall, covered in dark green scales, with sharp yellow eyes that did not blink. His name was Ryvek, and he was a warlord of the Kalori Dominion, a rising power at the edge of the galaxy. He had come to Pora 7 to study, to observe, and to plan. He watched the 3 humans walk through the market. He watched how others stepped aside for them. He watched, and something like anger burned slowly behind his yellow eyes. He turned to his lieutenant, a scarred Kalori soldier standing 2 steps behind him. "They bleed like anything else," Ryvek said quietly. His lieutenant said nothing. He only looked at the humans below, and for just a moment, something like doubt crossed his face. But Ryvek did not see it. He was already walking away. The Baekdu left Pora 7 2 days later with a full cargo hold and a heading toward the Holon Nebula. It was a routine trip, one Taeho had made dozens of times before. The trade lane between Pora 7 and the nebula was one of the busiest in the sector, used by merchant ships from over 100 different species. It was supposed to be safe. The Galactic Council maintained patrol ships along the route. Nothing ever happened there. Until something did. Yuna saw it first on the long-range scanner. 12 large contacts, holding position directly across the trade lane. They were not moving. They were waiting. "Taeho," she said, her voice changing from its usual relaxed tone to something sharper. "We have a blockade." Taeho walked over and looked at the screen. The ships were Kalori. Heavy warships, dark and angular, covered in weapons. Behind them, he could see the scattered signals of dozens of smaller merchant vessels that had been stopped and were now drifting without power. "They are raiding cargo ships," Yuna said, "right in the middle of a council-protected lane." Taeho said nothing for a long moment. Then he checked their fuel, their position, and their options. There was no way around the blockade without adding 3 weeks to their journey. And even then, the Kellery might have more ships on the other routes. "We go through," Taeho said. "We are a registered freight vessel. They have no legal right to stop us." Dohan appeared from the engine room, wiping grease from his hands. "What is happening?" "Kellery blockade," Yuna told him. "Stay calm and let Taeho talk." But Taeho did not get the chance to talk. Within 20 minutes, 2 Kellery warships broke from the formation and moved directly toward the Baekdu. A harsh voice came over the communication channel, speaking in the common galactic language. "Human vessel, cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your destruction." Yuna looked at Taeho. He nodded slowly. She cut the engines. The boarding was fast and rough. 12 Kalori soldiers came through the airlock. tall and heavy, their green scales covered in black armor. They carried plasma rifles and moved through the small ship like they owned it. They opened cargo containers, scanned equipment, and threw things aside without care. Tahoe stood in the main corridor and watched them. His hands were at his sides. His face showed nothing. "You are in a council-protected trade lane," he said to the lead soldier. "This boarding is illegal under Galactic Treaty." The soldier looked down at him. Kalori were tall, almost 2 meters, and this one had scars across his jaw. He simply pushed past him and continued searching. Dowan was near the cargo bay when 2 soldiers demanded the cargo manifests. He told them, politely, that the manifests were private commercial documents, and that they had no right to take them. One of the soldiers hit him across the face with the back of his armored hand. Dowan fell sideways into the wall, blood running from a cut above his eye. Yuna started forward, but Tahoe caught her arm. "Not yet," he said quietly. Then Rivik arrived. He walked through the airlock like he was stepping into his own home. His armor was finer than his soldiers, polished dark green with gold markings along the shoulders. His yellow eyes swept across the ship and found Tahoe standing in the corridor. "So, this is a human ship," Rivik said. He looked around with obvious disappointment. "I expected something more impressive." "Return my crew member and leave," Tahoe said. His voice was flat. There was no anger in it, no fear either. Rivik smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I have heard about your kind. The species that everyone is afraid of. The great humans." He leaned closer. "I see a small ship, a small crew, and a species that bleeds just like the rest of us." He gestured to his soldiers. They took the Baekdu's entire cargo, worth months of work and payment. Then Rivik looked at Dohwan, who was standing with blood still running down his face, and pointed at him. "That one comes with me," Rivik said, "a hostage, to send a message." 2 soldiers grabbed Dohwan by the arms. He did not struggle, but he looked at Tahoe. There was no panic in his eyes, only trust. Tahoe looked at Rivik. "You will return my crew member within 72 hours, he said. "After that, I will not ask again." Rivik laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound. "You will not ask again? What will you do, freight captain? Ram my warship with your cargo containers?" He turned and walked back to the airlock. His soldiers dragged Dohan with them. The airlock sealed. The Kalori ships pulled away. The Baekdu floated in silence. Its cargo hold was empty. One of its crew was gone. Yuna stood next to Tahoe. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anger. "What do we do?" she asked. Tahoe did not answer right away. He walked to the communication console, sat down and opened a channel. Not to the Galactic Council, not to Pora 7. He opened a channel to a frequency that most people in the galaxy did not even know existed. He spoke 5 words. "This is a Baekdu call." Then he closed the channel and sat back. Yuna stared at him. She knew what a Baekdu call was. Every human who worked in deep space knew. It was not a distress signal. It was not a request for help. It was something much older and much heavier than that. It was a statement that said a line had been crossed. 6 hours later, on 6 different human military stations scattered across the galaxy, officers stopped what they were doing. No alarms sounded. No announcements were made. The lights in the command centers simply changed from white to a deep, steady red. Quietly, calmly, like a heartbeat slowing down before something very fast happens. On Station Kyungho, the commanding officer read the Baekdu call report, closed the file, and said one word to her crew. "Prepare." No one asked what for. They already knew. Rivik, somewhere in the dark of space, was celebrating his victory over a drink and the cheers of his officers. He had proven that humans could be pushed. He had proven that the rule was nothing but an old story told by cowards. The news traveled faster than light. Within 12 hours, Every major species in the galaxy knew what the Kalori had done. They had boarded a human ship. They had struck a human crew member. They had taken a human hostage, and they had laughed about it. The reaction was immediate, and it was not what Rivik expected. No one was outraged on the humans' behalf. No one called for justice or filed complaints with the council. Instead, something much stranger happened. People started leaving. Merchant ships that had been operating near Kalori space for years began pulling out of the sector. Trade stations along the border lowered their lights and locked their docks. Alien families packed their belongings and booked transport to systems far away from anything the Kalori controlled. It was not panic. It was memory. On Galactic Station Pora 7, the human embassy sat at the end of a long corridor on the diplomatic level. It was a modest office, not large or decorated. A small wooden sign on the door said Embassy of Earth in the common galactic language, and below it, in smaller letters, the same words in Korean. Inside that office, a woman named Sujin sat behind a desk and read the 47th message she had received that morning. It was from the ambassador of the Talon Republic, a peaceful trading species with large dark eyes and soft voices. The message was polite, but urgent. It asked Sujin to please confirm that the human response would be measured and proportional. It asked her to please confirm that the humans would not do what they did to the Vanthari. Sujin read the message carefully. She typed a reply that thanked the ambassador for his concern, acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, and said absolutely nothing about what the humans intended to do. She pressed send and opened the 48th message. Yuna would have appreciated the technique. Say everything. Reveal nothing. By the second day, Elder Poma decided he could not stay silent. He used his authority as a senior council member to contact Rivik directly. The communication took time to arrange, and when Rivik finally appeared on screen, he looked relaxed and confident. Behind him, through the windows of his flagship, Poma could see the lights of the Kalori fleet stretching into the darkness. Elder Poma, Rivik said, showing his teeth in a grin, to what do I owe the honor? Poma did not waste time with pleasantries. Release the human hostage, he said. Apologize publicly. Return the cargo. Do it now, while you still can. Rivik leaned back in his chair. The Galactic Council sends an old historian to threaten me? I am not threatening you, Poma said. I am trying to save you. I was alive during the HFY War. I was a junior diplomat at the time, stationed on a world near the Vanthari border. Do you know what I saw? Rivik waved a hand, dismissively. Old stories. The Vanthari took 12 human colonists from a settlement on a border moon, Poma said, ignoring him. 12 people, not soldiers, farmers, teachers, children. The Vanthari thought they could use them as bargaining chips to force the humans to give up territory. Poma's voice became very quiet. The humans did not negotiate. They did not send diplomats. They did not even send a warning. Within 30 days, the Vanthari homeworld was occupied. Their entire fleet, 900 warships, was destroyed. And every single one of those 12 colonists was recovered alive. Not one scratch on them. Rivik said nothing, but his grin faded just slightly. And then, Poma continued, the humans left. They did not take the Vanthari worlds. They did not claim their resources. They simply left. And the Vanthari, as a civilization, never recovered. Not because the humans destroyed them permanently, but because the rest of the galaxy saw what happened, and no one would trade with them, ally with them, or trust them ever again. A species that was foolish enough to provoke humans was too foolish to do business with. Your story is noted, Rivik said coldly. But I am not the Vanthari. The Kalori Dominion has 300 warships. We are the strongest military power in this sector. One hostage from a cargo ship will not change that. Poma looked at him for a long time. Then I am sorry for what is coming, he said, and closed the channel. far from the politics and the messages and the fear. Dohan sat in a small cell aboard Ryvik's flagship, the Ironclaw. The cell was cold, and the floor was metal, and the light above him flickered every few minutes. His face still hurt from where the soldier had hit him, and the cut above his eye had dried into a dark line. But he was not afraid. He sat with his back against the wall and his eyes closed, and he thought about Teho. He thought about the way Teho had looked at Ryvik in that corridor. No anger, no panic, just a steady, quiet certainty, like a man who had already solved a problem and was simply waiting for the answer to arrive. A Kilori guard stood outside his cell. The guard was young, probably the same age as Dowan, and after several hours of silence, curiosity got the better of him. "Human," the guard said through the bars, "are you not afraid? Your ship is gone. Your captain has no fleet. You are alone on a warship with 3,000 Kilori soldiers. What do you have to hope for?" Dowan opened his eyes and looked at the guard. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, the same kind of smile he wore when he offered pastries to strangers on Pora 7. "I am not the one who should be afraid," Dowan said simply. The guard stared at him. Something in those words, something in the calm way the human said them, made the scales on the back of his neck rise. He turned away and did not speak to Dowan again. On the Baekdu, still floating in the empty trade lane, Teho sat in the pilot's chair and stared at the stars. Yuna sat across from him, monitoring communication channels. The ship was quiet. The cargo hold was empty. Everything felt hollow. Then a soft chime came from the console. One message, encrypted on a frequency that no alien technology could detect. Teho opened it. It contained 8 words. 72 hours acknowledged. Assets in position. Waiting. He had sent the Baekdu call only 40 hours ago. He had told Ryvek 72 hours. He had not told anyone else that number. But they knew it already. They always knew. Teho closed the message and leaned back. He did not smile. He did not feel relief. He felt the same thing he always felt before something like this. A deep and heavy sadness. Because he knew that none of this had to happen. Ryvek could have left them alone. Ryvek could have followed the rule. But Ryvek had made his choice, and now the clock was running. 40 hours remained. The 72 hours ended at exactly 0400 Galactic Standard Time. Ryvek was asleep in his quarters aboard the Ironclaw. His fleet of 300 warships floated in perfect formation around him, spread across thousands of kilometers of empty space. Weapons were charged. Shields were up. Patrols were running on schedule. Everything was in order. And then, everything was not. The first sign was the navigation systems. On every Kalori warship, at the exact same moment, the navigation screens went dark. Not one ship, not 10, all 300. Pilots who had been monitoring their routes suddenly found themselves staring at blank displays. They tapped the screens. They ran system checks. Nothing responded. 4 seconds later, the communication arrays followed. Every channel, every frequency, every relay went silent at once. Ships that had been talking to each other moments ago were now completely alone in the dark. 300 warships, and not one of them could speak to another. Then the sensors died. Radar, thermal imaging, long-range scanners, all gone. The Kalori fleet was blind. An officer on the Ironclaw ran to Ryvik's quarters and pounded on the door. Ryvik came out with fury in his yellow eyes and demanded to know what was happening. No one could tell him, because no one knew. The entire fleet had been shut down in under 6 minutes, without a single shot being fired, without a single alarm being triggered, and without a single enemy ship appearing on any scanner before the scanners died. The Kalori engineers worked desperately, crawling through the guts of their ships, trying to restart systems that simply refused to respond. It was as if someone had reached into the heart of every vessel and gently turned it off. Then the darkness outside the windows changed. Rivik was standing on the command deck of the Ironclaw, surrounded by officers who were shouting at each other, when one of them suddenly stopped and pointed at the main viewport. Everyone turned to look. 12 ships appeared from nothing. They did not fly in from a distance. They did not approach on any heading. They simply appeared, as if the space itself had decided to reveal what it had been hiding. 12 human warships, sleek and dark, smaller than the Kalori vessels, but carrying a silence about them that was heavier than any weapon. The Galactic Council, who had been monitoring the situation through deep space observation satellites, began streaming the encounter live to every connected world in the galaxy. Billions of beings, across thousands of planets, stopped what they were doing and watched. An open-channel broadcast cut through the dead silence of the Kalori fleet. Every speaker on every ship carried the same voice, calm and unhurried. "This is Captain Han Teho of the freighter Baekdu. You took one of mine. I said I would not ask again. I am not asking." Rivik stood at the viewport and stared at the 12 ships. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, he told himself. From anger. This was a bluff. It had to be a bluff. 12 ships against 300? The numbers were clear. But his ships could not move. His ships could not see. His ships could not speak. What happened next would later be given a name by the galactic historians. They called it the Precision Unraveling. The 12 human ships moved through the Kalori fleet like surgeons moving through a body. They did not fire explosive rounds. They did not launch missiles. Instead, they used something the Kalori had never seen before. Narrow beams of focused energy that cut with impossible accuracy. On each Kalori warship, the beams found the weapon systems and disabled them. Then the shield generators. Then the engines. Every cut was exact. Every strike hit only the machine, never the crew. Ship by ship, the Kalori fleet was taken apart. Not destroyed, disabled. 300 warships, the pride of the Kalori Dominion, reduced to floating metal in 11 minutes. Not one Kalori soldier died. Not one hull was breached. Not one life support system was touched. And that was the most terrifying part. Because it meant the humans could have done anything they wanted, destroyed the fleet, killed every soldier, cracked the ships open like eggs. And they chose not to. They had the power to end the Kalori Dominion in those 11 minutes, and instead they simply turned it off. Like a parent taking a dangerous toy from a child. Rivik stood on his command deck and watched his empire go dark around him. His officers had stopped shouting. Some of them were sitting on the floor. One of them was quietly crying. The great Kalori fleet, the force that was supposed to prove that humans were nothing special, floated dead in space. A single shuttle detached from one of the human warships and flew toward the Ironclaw. It docked at the main airlock. Rivik's remaining guards raised their weapons and aimed at the door. The airlock opened, and Sujin walked in. She was not wearing armor. She was not carrying a weapon. She wore a dark formal suit, neat and pressed, and her hair was pulled back in a simple style. She looked like she was arriving for a business meeting. She walked past the guards without looking at them. Their weapons followed her, but no one fired. No one dared. She found Rivik on the command deck. He was standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by dead screens and silent consoles. His yellow eyes followed her as she approached. "Warlord Rivik," Sujin said. Her voice was polite, professional, and completely without emotion. "I am Sujin, diplomatic representative of the human embassy. I am here to collect our citizen, Dowan. Please have him brought to me." Rivik's jaw tightened. For a moment, It looked like he might refuse. His claws pressed against his palms. The muscles in his neck were rigid. Then he looked through the viewport at his ruined fleet, and something broke behind his eyes. He gave the order. 2 minutes later, Doan walked onto the command deck. He had a bruise on his face, and his clothes were dirty. But he was walking on his own, and he was smiling. He saw Sujin and nodded. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Of course," Sujin replied. Then she turned back to Rivik. "The ships we disabled will need repair. We will send the coordinates of the specific systems we targeted to your engineering teams within the hour. Full schematics. Your fleet should be operational again in approximately 8 months." Rivik stared at her. "You are giving us instructions on how to repair our own ships?" "Yes," Sujin said. "Consider it a courtesy." She paused, and for the first time, something appeared in her eyes. Not anger, not pride, something colder. "We extend it once." She turned and walked back toward the airlock, with Doan beside her. The Kalori guards lowered their weapons and stepped aside without being asked. As the airlock closed behind them, Rivik sank into his command chair. The deck was silent. The lights were dim. The stars outside were cold. His lieutenant, who had watched everything without speaking, leaned close and whispered something that would haunt Rivik for the rest of his life. "Sir," the lieutenant said, "Fleet intelligence has confirmed. Those 12 ships were from a border patrol station. They were not even a main fleet. They were the ones who happened to be closest." Rivik closed his eyes. The flagship drifted in silence, and around it, 300 warships sat dark and dead in the emptiness of space. Perfectly intact, completely helpless. A monument to the mistake of one creature who thought that because something bleeds, it can be broken. 6 months passed. The galaxy moved on, the way it always did, with trade and politics and the ordinary noise of 4,000 species living side by side. But something had changed. It was a small change, the kind you could only notice if you were paying attention. People spoke a little more quietly when humans walked by. Merchants offered them better prices without being asked. Diplomats returned their messages faster. It was not fear, exactly. It was something older than fear. It was respect earned by restraint, the kind that comes when someone shows you exactly what they could do, and then chooses not to do it. The Kellery Dominion spent those 6 months rebuilding their fleet. True to Sujin's word, human engineers had sent complete repair schematics within an hour of the incident. Every damaged system, every disabled weapon, every dead engine was mapped out with precise instructions on how to fix it. Some Kalori engineers said the schematics were more detailed than their own original blueprints. It was, in its own way, the most insulting part of the whole affair. The humans had taken their fleet apart and understood it better than the people who built it. Rivik did not oversee the rebuilding. 3 weeks after the incident, his own Council of Elders removed him from power. The vote was unanimous. They did not punish him for his aggression or his ambition. They punished him for his stupidity. He had risked the entire Dominion for the sake of pride. And the Kalori were many things, but they were not a species that valued pride over survival. Rivik lived now in a small dwelling on a cold Kalori border moon. He did not give interviews. He did not make public statements. He woke up each morning, looked out at the gray sky, and tried not to think about the sound of his fleet going silent. He was not always successful. His lieutenant, the one who had whispered that final truth on the command deck, retired from the military entirely. When asked why, he said only that he had learned everything he needed to learn about war in 11 minutes, and that nothing else would ever compare. On Galactic Station Pora 7, Elder Poma stood once again at the front of his lecture hall. A new class of young diplomats sat before him, 60 this time. Word had spread about his lectures. More students were enrolling every year. He began the way he always did, with the hologram of the small blue planet. But this time, when he spoke about the rule, no one laughed. No one raised a hand to question why soft, short-lived creatures deserved such caution. They had all watched the broadcast. They had all seen 300 warships go dark in 11 minutes. Poma added a new section to his lecture. He showed the broadcast footage, the Kalori fleet losing power system by system, the 12 human ships moving with quiet precision, and the image that had become the most famous still in the galaxy, Sujin walking through the airlock of the Iron Claw, in her dark suit, unarmed, surrounded by armed Kalori soldiers, looking like she was the most dangerous person in the room. Because she was. The students watched in complete silence. The Kalori had 300 warships, Poma said. The humans sent 12, not because 12 was all they had, but because 12 was all they needed. And they did not kill a single Kalori. They could have. Any other species in this galaxy would have. But the humans chose to leave them alive. And that choice, that deliberate, careful, calculated mercy, is exactly why the rule exists. Far from the lecture hall, on a different level of Pora 7, Do-Wan sat in a small studio across from a journalist, a six-armed alien from the Rithani Press Network. The interview had been requested months ago, and Do-Wan had finally agreed to it, mostly because Yuna told him it would be good for human relations, and partly because the journalist had offered to buy him lunch. "You were held captive for nearly 3 days," the journalist said, all 6 hands folded politely on the desk. "You were struck. You were alone on a warship with 3,000 hostile soldiers. Were you not afraid?" Do-Wan thought about it. He really did give the question honest consideration, tilting his head and looking up at the ceiling the way he always did when he was thinking. "No," he said finally, "I was not." "Why not?" "Because I knew my captain, and I knew what would happen." The journalist leaned forward. "What do you mean? What are humans exactly? The galaxy has thousands of stories, but I want to hear it from you. What are you?" Do-Han smiled. It was the same warm, open smile he had worn when he offered pastries to aliens in the market. The same smile he had given the Kalori guard through the bars of his cell. "We are the species that does not start fights," he said, "but we are also the species that made 3 civilizations disappear because they took something from us. The galaxy has 4,000 species, and I think most of them have learned the same lesson by now. We are friendly, we are generous, we are curious about everything and everyone. We love to learn about other cultures and share our own. We want to trade and explore and build things together. But if you take one of ours, if you hurt one of ours, then you will learn something else about us, and you will not enjoy the lesson." The journalist's 6 hands were very still. She did not ask another question for a long time. 3 docking bays away, the Baekdu was being loaded with fresh cargo. The hull had been repaired and repainted, though Taeho had insisted they keep a few of the old dents. He said they gave the ship character. Yuna said they gave the ship the appearance of a vehicle that had been in too many parking accidents, but she did not argue. Do-Han arrived at the ship just as the last container was being loaded. He was carrying a bag of alien pastries, enough for the whole crew, and then some. "How was the interview?" Yuna asked. "Fine," Do-Han said. "I think I made the journalist nervous." "You make everyone nervous now," Yuna said. The famous human hostage who smiled at his captors. Taeho was already in the pilot's chair, running through the pre-flight checks. He did not turn around when Do-Han boarded, but his shoulders relaxed just slightly, the way they always did, when all his people were accounted for. "Heading?" Yuna asked, sliding into her seat. "Hold-on Nebula," Taeho said. "Same route as before. The route where we got kidnapped? The cargo will not deliver itself." Yuna sighed, leaned back, and smiled. Some things did not change. The Baekdu lifted off from Pora 7 and turned toward the stars. In the corridors of the station behind them, Aliens watched the small freight ship fly away. A few of them, merchants and travelers and children who had grown up hearing stories about humans, stopped and watched until the ship's lights disappeared into the dark. On the diplomatic level, Sujin returned to her desk, opened her messages, and began answering the day's correspondence. Life continued. And in the lecture hall, Elder Pulma closed his final lesson of the year with the words he had chosen carefully over many long nights. Words that would be quoted in textbooks and diplomatic guides for centuries to come. "The rule is not a punishment," he said to his students. "It is not a threat. It is simply what happens when you pay attention to history. Humans do not conquer. Humans do not enslave. They do not want your worlds, or your resources, or your submission. But they protect what is theirs with a fury that has no equal in the known galaxy. So remember the rule. Follow it. Teach it to your children and your children's children." But because every species that forgot it is not here to remind you, the students filed out of the lecture hall in silence. Outside, the station hummed with life. Ships came and went. Species mingled and traded and argued and laughed. And somewhere out in the vast darkness between the stars, a small, dented freight ship carried its crew toward the next job, the next adventure, the next cup of bad coffee, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that no matter how far from home they traveled, they were never truly alone. The galaxy was very large, and the humans were very small. But some things are not measured by size. Some things are measured by what you do when someone takes one of yours.